Hello, wonderful. This is Sarah, and I'm here with Adriana Bucci, and we're going to talk narcissistic mama drama. Hello, how are you?
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm good. How are you?
I'm awesome. So, Adriana is a narcissistic abuse recovery coach who helps empower survivors to set boundaries and heal so they can do life on their own terms. But she has this phrase that I just love. And it's like, let's get your shift together. And I just love it. I think it's so cute.
Thank you.
So, congratulations on branding.
Thank
And
you.
yes. And let's talk about the effects of a narcissistic mom.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's like a lot of effects. But it's beyond just the psychological effects. So like, you lose your sense of self. You don't really have a sense of self to begin with.
Yeah, I was about to say, it doesn't seem like you could ever, it would be more difficult to form one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And like the healing part, it's like all about figuring out who you even are because you spend your whole life with this identity that like you are an extension of your mother because that's kind of how narcissistic mothers view their daughters in particular, where you're literally an extension for them. You're born for their, you know, whatever you want to call it, their happiness, their approval, whatever it is, their narcissistic supply. And it's really shattering mentally and emotionally, and then also physically, because I, ended up suffering for 4 years with physical chronic pain. And eventually, once I hit rock bottom in my pain, I learned about something called the mind body connection, where childhood trauma and repressed emotions from childhood trauma are basically the cause for that physical pain. And it's, so it's like a full effect, like physical, mental, emotional, everything. And it's a lot to get through, but it's possible first and foremost, and it's so worth it once you start doing that inner work and all that stuff. Because once I started doing the inner work that I needed to get out of my physical pain, I started realizing that this was helping me heal from the wounds with my mother, because I kind of had this belief that I knew my mom was a narcissist. I knew it was like a bad situation. And my assumption was, okay, I'm just scarred for life and that's it. And,
Oh, my listeners are
whatever.
like getting it right now because I'm like, I hate that phrase, right? And it's like, healing is a lifelong journey. And it's like,
Yeah.
gosh, stop healing and start growing. Like, get your healing, like, get your shift together, right?
Yep.
Get your shift together and do the work.
Yep.
And then move on. Because I do see some people and they get trapped in this like healing journey. That's really fascinating because then it's like, when it seems like there's always just so much. When we tell ourselves we always need to heal, it's like there's always something really wrong with us.
Right.
We lose sight of what's right with us, right?
For sure.
Yeah,
For sure.
yeah. So what are some steps you take to overcome a mother wound from a narcissistic mother?
Yeah. So, I mean, at first I thought it was just, you just push everything down, you ignore everything and move on with life and shove everything to the to the bottom. But
it seems like maybe not.
That's not the best thing to do. Yeah. That's what I thought.
We've all tried that. We've all tried that.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. So my pain really woke me up to understanding that I had to process my repressed emotions and allow myself to feel how I felt when I was a kid. And I didn't have the opportunity to feel however I felt because I was focused on my mother's emotions. So a lot of the healing work does involve feeling those emotions that we have pushed to the side for decades. And it's really scary at first, but you have to realize that emotions themselves are not going to kill you. And right? Because that's the unconscious belief behind everything. When your parent invalidates your emotions as a kid, it's like, okay, well, I can't feel this emotion because if I do, it's going to piss my mom off. And then if it does, she's not going to love me anymore. If she doesn't love me anymore, I'm going to die. So you kind of take that conditioning with you throughout your life, that emotions equal death. And, it's not just because of narcissistic mothers that people have this conditioning that emotions are not okay. Like society reinforces it, workplaces reinforce it. Like it's just, there's no space for emotions. And I really had to learn what the hell an emotion was to begin with, because no one tells you about it. You think it's just this mental process that you just think, oh my God, I'm sad and this is horrible. I'm going to be sad forever. holy crap, this is the worst thing ever. But what I learned was that emotions are actually a physical process. So you actually feel your emotions in your body. And when you tune into your body and let yourself feel the emotion in your body, then the emotion actually goes away really quickly. And you can't really understand it until you do it.
Yes, yes. And I think that's such an important point, to kind of have grace and space with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
If we were in situations where as kids we weren't allowed to feel emotions,
Mm-hmm.
and then to bring them back into the limelight, right?
Yeah.
But then not allowing them to become our everything, right? Because you said something really important. We feel them and process and move on from them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You don't want to get into this like everything's horrible, everything.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Joe Dispenza, he talks about memorizing negative emotions and difficult emotions. And we get in these
Mm-hmm.
emotional states, and it's like we practice sadness so much.
Yeah.
It's a tricky journey, right? If think about it, that can be helpful too. If you're nervous about feeling it, it's like something you're going through.
Mm-hmm.
Not you're always going to be sad. You're
Exactly.
always going to live there, right?
Exactly. It's, there's some metaphor that I heard or read, it's not my metaphor at all, but if you imagine a pack of like animals walking through a storm, right? If they try and run away from the storm's going to keep chasing them.
Interesting.
Yeah. But like walking through it is the fastest way to get out of it. And that's exactly the emotional work. You got to go through it to heal it.
Agree. So once you go through those emotions, do you have any practices for sitting with difficult emotions?
So journaling is really effective. It was effective for me at least, and I teach my clients to journal. So just kind of rage journaling, not this dear diary, this happened today, and this is how I feel kind of stuff that we think journaling is. It's you pick a situation and then you like vomit on paper, and use cuss words as much as you like, say whatever you like, and then you destroy it after 20 minutes. And that can really help to get the emotions to come up so that they can come out. And once they come up, it's like when it comes up, you notice where it is in your body. And then it's all about allowing it to be there instead of, well, I shouldn't be feeling this anymore because this happened 10 years ago and I should be over this by now. And how long is this going to last? And how horrible is this going to be? And all these stories that we make up in our heads about like what the emotion means. But the real thing that emotions mean are that you're human and it's okay to have them.
And people I wanted to like punch in the face during my own healing journey, and they would say things like, because I would say, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this.
Right.
Well, who says you shouldn't?
Exactly.
Where is it written? And I'll be like, I am going to literally like rip your face off right now because I'm so mad that you told me that. And which is another emotion, right? That was difficult things for me to hear. And I am a real destination person. I appreciate people who love the process.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not so good at that. So that's
not understandable.
Not a straight theory one. But it is true. And I have been enough in my journey to know that it doesn't last forever.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you ever have the experience that I remember thinking like, I feel like this is like old sadness. Like it's not even anything current. I just feel like this is like old sadness. Have you ever felt that?
Absolutely. Totally.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Is that
and that's the thing.
Yeah.
We repress it, right? So it's like when you feel sad about something that, if it's 10 years ago and 10 years ago, the sad thing happens, the main, like the first reflex that we have is to like push it down and put on a brave face and put on a smile and show strength and all that stuff that we've been conditioned to believe that like, we don't show emotions. So when you do that, you actually repress the emotion and you don't actually give yourself a chance to feel it. And then where does it go? It goes nowhere. It stays stuck in the body. And then, at some point, 10 years later, you end up with chronic pain for some reason.
Right.
And it's literally an accumulation of all the emotions that we have been pushing down for the entirety of our lives.
Yeah, and it's so sad. So how do you start to build your confidence back after a narcissistic mother? That's the question I have a lot from especially females who learned what it meant to be a woman in some ways from a mother who's a narcissist. How do you start building your confidence back?
Right. So it's, doing the emotional work is huge because, the lack of confidence stems from not being confident in your childhood because you couldn't express yourself. So when you're an adult, it's no wonder that there's a lack of confidence because you have a narcissistic mother, because there was never any confidence instilled in you. And, my narcissistic mother, she would yell at me for not being confident enough, which is just so ironic. And you just have this belief that like you're supposed to be confident or whatever, and no one even knows what it means, but it's really,
Okay, I love, and I would love to define what confidence means, right?
Sure.
Because I call it like an abstract word. It's like, I want to be happy.
Yeah.
I want to be confident. I want to be this. I want to be relieved. What does that mean to you, right?
Exactly.
So that we need to diagnose what, or dissect, I guess, not diagnose, what confidence is too, right?
Totally. In my opinion, it's just like being comfortable in your own skin and being comfortable with your decisions, being comfortable with setting boundaries, being comfortable with being you with all of your flaws and all of the goodness that you have to offer, and just accepting the fact that you're not a perfect human being. You can't live up to the standards that the narcissistic mother in your life has tried to force you to have, because it's just impossible, because the standards change every 5 seconds.
That's important to remember. Yeah, I call it the finish line is always moving, right?
Exactly.
As soon as you get somewhere,
yeah. So it's part of understanding that, and like understanding it logically is one thing, but understanding it emotionally is another thing. And emotions really are everything. So when you start looking into the emotions that are there for the lack of confidence, it's like, what does that bring up? And it's usually shame. So letting yourself feel your shame is a great way to get rid of that shame. And then when the emotion gets processed and the shame kind of goes away because you've processed it, doesn't mean you'll never feel shame again. It just means you know what to do with it next time. And when it gets processed, it gets released, and then you have more clarity and you have more comfort within your own skin.
So I love that shame is the emotion we're talking about, because what a tricky one, right? I mean, because even if like you're with friends, you're like, I'm sad. Okay, my feelings are hurt. I'm angry. It's like, okay, but it's like, I'm ashamed. It's like, whoa.
Yeah.
What do we do with that one?
Right.
And so I think when I think about confidence, I think about it as like building small wins in our life.
Exactly.
And, there's self-esteem, which is like, I'm good just because of who I am, which is important. And then there's feeling capable to be able to handle what comes at you in your own life. And none of us know what that's going to be.
Exactly.
But feeling confident that like, well, I don't know what's coming, but I know I'm bringing myself to the table. Right. And exactly. I'm working on the skills that I need to build what life is coming and building those small wins. And that is so important too, because you have to get rid of that shame. And shame is like, I can't do it, or I did something wrong.
Right.
And confidence is like, ooh, look, I'm building myself up and figuring out what I can do right.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So what are some other traits when you're with a narcissist, when you have a narcissistic mom? If somebody's like, oh, I'm not sure, is she not? What are some telltale signs?
Sure. So, if she gets mad at you for having a different opinion, there's a lot of gaslighting that goes on as well. And this, like, it's universal for like all narcissists. Like the traits are really so similar. So, but they're different, obviously. Like a narcissistic significant other versus a narcissistic mother, it's going to look different, but the dynamics are going to be very similar. So there's the 3 stages of the cycle of abuse. There's the love bomb, devalue, and discard. So, obviously when it's your mother, they're not going to love bomb you when they first meet you because, that it just doesn't make sense. But love bombing can look different, where it's like promises for, a down payment on a house, or we're going to take that family trip we always wanted to take, or, you're the best daughter ever, that kind of stuff, where they purposely build you up and compliment you and shower you with, whatever is going to make you happy in order to hook you in to continue abusing you. So then, shortly after the love bombing, you'll have the devalue where, she'll start chipping away at your confidence. She'll start insulting you. Like, you do the dishes wrong, or you do everything wrong, and just all these random different things that they come up with that's like a standard, and it's more insulting than anything, but you don't really realize that it's abuse because it's just so covert and so insidious.
What's
And
a kid supposed to know anyway? I
exactly.
mean, even in a, when you think about partner abuse, it's like, well, he
Mhm.
doesn't hit me, so it's not abuse.
Exactly.
That's hard enough for adults to navigate, much less a
Mhm.
child. And I'm sure
Right.
the parent says things like, well, it's my job to teach you how to be a better person. It's my
Mhm.
job to point out what you're doing wrong. It's my job to, but thinking about devaluing, it's not an
Mhm.
obvious big glaring like Captain Obvious sign. It's not a parent's job to devalue their child
Right.
or to get their
Exactly.
child to not trust themselves, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And the main goal is to get the child to not trust themselves so that they
Yeah.
only rely on the mother to be trusted. So it's like you don't even have your own identity. So it's, the way that you're feeling is wrong. The way
Yeah.
that you're behaving is wrong. And if you call your narcissistic mother out on it, it'll be like gaslighting. So it's like, well, I never said that. I didn't do that. What are you talking about? You're going crazy.
Yeah.
You're too sensitive. And that is abuse because that is denial of your reality. And it's not seen as abuse, but it really has a massive effect on you growing up.
Getting you not to trust yourself.
Mhm.
It's just the basis of disaster, right? I
Yep.
mean, if you cannot trust yourself, how do you go for that new job? How do you bring healthy relationships? How do you
Mhm.
parent well? How do you, I mean, everything, right?
Exactly.
So how do you start back that process of trusting yourself?
So it's important to it's funny because this week I'm actually doing a trust yourself challenge on my Instagram. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Yes.
Yeah. So it's the first thing is just understanding that there is nothing wrong with you, because when you don't trust yourself after narcissistic abuse, especially from a parent, it's you really believe that something's wrong with you because
Yeah.
you couldn't have been the ideal daughter. You couldn't make your parent happy. You were always messing something up and it's all your fault. And you feel this sense of responsibility that you are responsible for your mother's happiness. So understanding that you're not responsible for it, and, your mother is an adult and she is responsible for her own happiness, and bringing a child into the world to make you happy is not a really good reason to have one.
Mhm.
So it's you have to understand that when somebody brings a kid into the world, they owe that kid a
Yeah.
decent life, which narcissistic mothers don't see it that way. They see
Mhm.
that the kid owes them like a decent life because, the sacrifices they had to make and whatever. But like understanding that you didn't ask to be born is like
Right.
first and foremost very important, because that brings it into perspective of like, well, I didn't choose to be here. You chose for me to be here and you chose to abuse me, because abuse is always a choice. And understanding that it was never you. It was never you that had something wrong with you. It was all her. And it said more about her than you because you really didn't know anything, because this is the person you learned everything from. And once you accept that and understand that, understanding how a narcissist's mind works is also very important, because when you do that, it helps you realize that, like, wow, okay, the way this person thinks is not normal. And this is not how I treat people. So I guess, I'm not abusive myself, because sometimes
Yeah.
you gaslight yourself and think that
Yeah.
you're a horrible person.
Mhm.
And, after that, understanding how the narc's mind works, like protecting yourself from the abuse, is going to come naturally from learning about just those dynamics. And then when you start to do that inner emotional work and like processing your emotions behind everything in baby steps, of course, because you don't want to dive
Yeah.
into it and re-traumatize yourself,
Mhm.
that really starts to solidify that ability to start trusting yourself again. And the more you do it, the more you'll start trusting yourself. And the more you start incorporating emotions into your life and understanding your emotions, the more you start trusting yourself, because your emotions are part of your internal guidance. It's part of your GPS system. It's part of listening to your intuition. And if you can't listen to your emotions, they're usually louder than your intuition. So that is going to
That's a good point.
really overpower everything, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
And
Yeah.
you're
It's that people ask the difference between intuition and trauma, right?
Mhm.
And so if you're with someone and you feel like something's off, intuition's kind of like, something feels weird, or in a good way. I just know, I just feel like I should do this, There was an amazing lady on the phone. She was asking me to sign up for my program. And I was just kind of like, I don't know why, but I feel like we need to talk in 6 weeks, right? That's intuition, right? Yeah. Versus trauma, which is spiraling, like feeling as if you're falling down a hole and your emotions are too big for your body. Right? Would that be a good distinction between?
Yeah, and like the dread of like something horrible is going to happen. Like that's trauma, not so much intuition.
Yeah, because intuition can be good things are going to happen too.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And kind of into like a small knowing versus feeling as if you're spiraling or falling or in a storm, right? Those emotions can get so big.
Exactly.
Yeah. So other than journaling, what do you like to tell your clients to do with crazy big emotions?
So, once, they get comfortable with the journaling, or, if they're doing like voice to text or whatever, like it's kind of, you have to get the words out somehow. And doing that is a great way to get those emotions to come up. And I also teach my clients to work with triggers, because when you get triggered, it's inevitable. We're all going to get triggered, and we all think that triggers are this thing that we have to run away from at all costs, but it is just an emotion coming up to come out. So
spreadsheets trigger me, and I feel very comfortable about running away from those at all costs.
I don't blame you.
Stories or something, and they're like, "Oh, you probably don't remember." I was like, "Oh, I do remember. I remember everything." And then they're like, "Did you not notice that box was blank?" No, I didn't notice that box was blank. So spreadsheets are my triggers, and I take full. I'm okay with that piece of me.
Yeah,
I've got a piece of
that's okay.
I hate spreadsheets.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not impacting your life and you can get someone else to do it, that's okay.
I can get somebody else to do it.
Yeah, by all means, run from it.
Yes, I can get it. But actually, that's kind of one of my interesting things. People talk about I got triggered.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, did you get triggered, or were you around another toxic person and you experienced that same feeling? And those are two different conversations, right?
Yeah.
Because if we have one major traumatic toxic event, it's a horrible idea to say everyone's toxic and horrible. And it's equally a bad idea to say, well, it's never going to happen to me again, and I don't have to do any of the work to fix it, right? Like, both of those are really bad options. There is a door number 3. There is a middle way.
There is.
Yes, yeah.
And most people wait until they have suffered their maximum amount before getting to door number 3.
So a lot of my clients are in their 50s.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of my ladies.
And me too. Some of my clients are in their 50s and 60s.
Isn't it heartbreaking?
Yes.
We are
yes and no. Yes, not really.
Yes and no.
They give themselves a chance to like move forward from everything, which is amazing. And a lot of people reach their deathbeds and it's like, crap, I've wasted my entire life trying to make other people happy. So, giving yourself that chance to like live out the rest of your life on your own terms is amazing. But it's nice to learn before that age. Of course,
it is right. Yeah.
What can you do, right?
The best time to plant a tree is, 100 years ago. The next best time is today, right?
Exactly.
And then that's all we can do. And I think anyone who has had any type of toxic relationship has some sense of having lost pieces of their life or lost years of their life.
Absolutely.
So we all just have to start from here, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So what are some of your favorite tips or tricks or steps to get people to move forward if they feel like they're stuck?
Identifying what emotion's keeping them stuck, because it's usually an emotional reason, and the resistance is not wanting to feel that emotion. So then, you distract yourself, you do other things, you spend hours scrolling or binge watching Netflix or whatever. So when you feel stuck like that, instead of reaching for the thing that's going to distract you even more from moving forward, explore that feeling of stuckness and what's behind it. And do it is, start thinking about like, I feel stuck today because, and see where that takes you. And then you never know where that's going to go. And it might connect to something really random from like your childhood, or it might connect to something super random from like yesterday. And then it starts to make sense. And it's like, wow, okay, cool. And that's a really great way to move forward from feeling stuck. And if you don't feel like journaling, that's okay. Exploring the emotion another way is another option. Like you can meditate on it, you can breathe into it, focus on your breathing, whatever works. Everyone's different when it comes to processing emotions, but whatever you can do to get yourself to at least think about the emotion is a great first step.
Yeah. And recognize it's not the end.
Exactly.
Right.
And the emotion's not permanent.
I know, that's so hard. Okay,
Yep.
So last major topic of conversation, how to set boundaries with the toxic mama.
Yeah, so that's a great question.
I thought you might like that one. Yes.
So it's going to feel impossible at first because it's like super overwhelming, but identifying what is stopping you from setting those boundaries, again, usually an emotion, is a great first step. So, you have to figure out how you feel about the fact that you want to set these boundaries and what's stopping you. Is it because you feel like you're a horrible person? Mm-hmm. And if so, explore that, because exploring that doesn't mean you are a horrible person. It's going to bring to light what it is that's in the subconscious that's making you think that you're a terrible person for setting these boundaries, and bring it to light so you can actually release it. Because the more you hold on to that, the more you ignore it, the harder it's going to be to set a boundary. Because, you can shut off your emotions and pretend you're not affected and say like, I'm not having this conversation with you anymore. Bye, mom. Hang up the phone. And then 2 seconds later, you're overwhelmed with guilt. And then you call her back and you break that boundary altogether. And then you're back in that loop.
And that's we get addicted to that drama, right? So that's a really important point. It's like, and then we like dive back into it because it is so normal. That round of chaos is so normal. That's a really important thing to recognize if you're caught up in that trap.
Exactly. Right? Exactly. And then giving yourself the opportunity to feel that guilt, right? So when you do have that conversation, you hang up on her and you feel guilty, you have two choices that, a lot of people are not aware that there is a choice. You can act on the guilt. So acting on the guilt would be calling her right back or, self-sabotaging in some other way to distract yourself from the guilt. Or you can actually let yourself sit with that guilt. So, you'll probably be triggered with guilt in that moment, and then just let that guilt come up so you can feel it, and then you can release it, and then it's going to go away, and then you can stick to that boundary. And, this is a way of like rewiring your brain by feeling your emotions in order to release them and be okay with the decision that you're making to set that boundary. Because logically, you need to set the boundary with your mother if she's being super abusive towards you. Like, it's no way to live. And, all adult children of narcissistic parents have tried to have the civilized conversation with their parent, but it just never seems to work out. So it's like, we all know you tried and you tried, and no amount of more trying is going to remedy the situation, because if it was going to work, it would have by now. So really understanding that first and foremost, and letting yourself feel however you feel, because this is conditioned guilt. Narcissists purposely make you feel guilty for setting boundaries because they know that it's a difficult emotion to deal with. So when you're in that state, you're easier to control. And
that's a really important point. And that's what I was going to say when you were talking about sitting with that guilt. It's also recognizing, I don't want to say, should I be feeling guilty? Because I hate to use the should word for almost any reason whatsoever. But it's like, is it guilt? Am I feeling guilty because I did something wrong, or feeling guilty because someone made me feel like I was doing something?
Exactly.
And even if it's like my life was a TV show right now, if I was watching the TV, would they say I was the villain, or would they say my mother was the villain?
Exactly.
Right? Because it's processing our emotions and that guilt, but then knowing what is ours to take on.
Exactly.
And what is not ours to take on.
Exactly. And without digging in and doing the inner work, you're never going to really know what is yours or what isn't yours to take on.
And, within bringing it into other relationships in your life, it's like, oh man, I want to find the right guy. And it's like, man, you're taking on everybody's junk all the time. Like you don't have boundaries in your life. Like you continually put up with bad behavior and you're thinking you're going to like attract the right guy. Like there's some stuff that needs to happen.
Exactly.
Before you're bringing that version of you into a relationship.
Exactly. 100%.
Right. And do you feel like it's also one of the things I hear every time I'm on the phone with people is they say, I don't even know who I am. And I feel like that would be 1,000 times worse with a narcissistic mother. Is that what? Yeah. How do you take some steps to find out who you are after that type of relationship?
I mean, not being so concerned about who you are at first is a good step to figure out who you are, because you can get so fixated on like, who am I? What do I like? What's my style? What kind of music do I listen to? And then you're just so overwhelmed, and that becomes its own distraction.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Right. So that becomes its own distraction from doing your inner work. So the thing that I like to tell people is, don't worry so much about defining and putting a label on who you are, right? Like, just let yourself have the opportunity to be, just in general, and then it'll start coming to you. It'll start making more sense to you. And it's a lifelong journey. So there's all this pressure to like figure out who we are by a certain age, and then you come out of the trauma of realizing you have a narcissistic mother, and then there's this pressure of figuring out who you are after that. But like, the reality is, you already are you, and unlearning who your mother wanted you to be is going to help you figure out who you are. So, it's definitely a process. It's not an overnight thing, but as you heal, as you grow.
There's no magic pill.
I know, right? I wish. I wish.
Yeah. Well, as you learn and you grow, and I think about it too, is like trying on different pairs of shoes. Like, you can try on things, try on new hobbies, try on activities, and try on new relationships and see if they fit.
Exactly. And what's in style now isn't going to be in style 10 years from now. So, who you are today, you might become a different person 10 years from now because you discover new interests and new things and stuff like that. And that's amazing, right? So it's like, always be open to shifting who you are, because we're ever evolving people. Like, humans just change day by day, and by opening yourself up to healing, doing the inner work, growth, you're going to start figuring out who you are as you go along on that path. And there's no pressure to really put a strict definition on who exactly you are.
Yeah, there's no right answer, right?
Exactly.
That's awesome. So usually I have to point out something funny, as you can see the sun shifted and now it's like this. Some people are talking about having to be perfect and all this kind of stuff. This happened one other time in an interview, and I started giggling, and I was like, okay, so when people think you have to be perfect, and like give yourself grace looks like this is what it looks like.
Exactly.
On my window. The podcast listeners are like, what is she talking about? Well, because I have to say something funny. Usually I match the people. Like, it's a kind of crazy how there's something that, like, clothing wise I match, but I think you and I like match heads.
Yeah. I see it.
It's not our clothes. It's like our faces match. It's like our faces match. So
I see the resemblance.
So funny. Oh, that's so awesome. So tell people where they can find more out about you and what you do in your work.
Sure. So you can find me on Instagram at Let's Get Your Shift Together, shift with an F. And my website is the same thing, letsgetyourshiftogether.com. And, basically, I mean, every social media that I have, like, if you just Google Let's Get Your Shift Together, you'll find me, and you'll find everything. But I'm most active on Instagram. That's the place to really find me. Instagram is like my dark zone. Like, it's like, I have it. It's like, I don't know what to do with Instagram, but it doesn't matter. We all have our own, and we're all needed at different places in the world. Totally. In different stages of people's lives. So it's awesome. Thank you so much for coming on here and helping us in our journey to become toxic person proof. Thanks for having me.